Hi there, I'm John Moore, and I am a shamanic teacher. That means I teach shamanism. And I live in the great state of Maine in the United States, and that's where I'm talking to you from. You can't really see much out the window because it's very bright at the moment. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how to balance your divine masculine and feminine energies, or how to balance your spiritual masculine and feminine energies. And so to begin, I have to just talk a little bit about what we mean by that. So there is an old but not ancient book of spiritual wisdom called the Kybalion, which is part of the sort of the grander scope of Hermetic texts, and in there is the principle of gender. And this says, I'm going to read it because I want to get it word for word. It says, "Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes." Now, when we talk about gender and masculine and feminine in today's age, there is a lot of baggage there, because there is sex and gender identity, and people who are gender fluid or transgender, and there's all of this stuff about gender and about identity and about sex and sexuality and all of these things. But this is not exactly what this principle is talking about. And I almost wish they had used a different word than gender, and they had used different adjectives than masculine and feminine, because really what we're talking about are active and passive principles. These principles, these archetypes, these impulses. The other thing is, this didn't say that everything is either masculine and feminine. It says everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Everything and everyone has both masculine and feminine principles. And what we're talking about here is the divine masculine and the divine feminine, not culturally what we've decided men should be like, and culturally what we've decided women should be like, because those things have very little to do with divinity, and a whole lot to do with the shit show, pardon my French, called the patriarchy, right? This patriarchy that we've been living under for thousands of years, that says that men are on the top and women are on the bottom, and men are superior and women are inferior, and men deserve more pay than women, and all of that crap that doesn't hold a speck of truth on the spiritual planes. So what we're really talking about here are two impulses, two spiritual impulses, two qualities, two principles, two archetypes. And I'm going to reference the modern philosopher Ken Wilber here, because I like his writing about this stuff. And he talks about the masculine and feminine principles, and he titles them Eros and Agape. Now, these are two words from the Greek. I believe they're both Greek. Agape is definitely Greek, and I believe Eros is as well. Eros is a word for love, and so is agape, but they have kind of different meanings. But the way he uses them is Eros is the masculine divine impulse, and this is an impulse for an individual to evolve, right? And I'm not talking about just evolution as a biological impulse, although that is also a thing. So if you think about, biologically, we started out as a cell, an egg, or two cells, an egg and a sperm, and they collided, and then they separated, and then they organized. And there is that principle for us to grow into adulthood, to gain knowledge and wisdom. There is, if you can think back to things as a child that you really, really, really wanted to learn, and, I can think back to everything from riding a bike to tying my shoes to, whatever. That is an impulse to evolve as a human being. And everything, whether we can see it or not, has that same impulse, and that is a reflection of the divine masculine. It is also active and individualistic to some degree. There is a little bit of feminine in the masculine and vice versa, but that's a little more complex, and that is a topic for another day. So the feminine principle, which he calls agape, is the impulse to organize, to collect, to come together, to communicate, all of these things, right? So again, we think about human beings, and we evolve from two cells, but that doesn't happen without things getting collected, right? So individual cells collect into tissues, tissues collect into organs, organs collect into systems, systems collect into bodies, bodies collect into families, families collect into, societies, into cultures, into the world, the universe, right? So this is sort of the organizing principle, the holding principle. Another way the divine masculine and the divine feminine have been expressed is through, probably you're familiar with yin and yang in Taoism, or yin and yo in Chinese or in Japanese, sorry. In the symbol of the circle with the dark and the light, and you'll always see, like, in the dark swoosh there's a light dot, and in the light swoosh there's a dark dot, right? That is the masculine in the feminine, and the feminine in the masculine. And like I said, that's a complex topic for another day. So this is really what we're talking about. What we're really talking about are these two impulses, and how do you, as a human being, balance them out? Because too much of one principle, depletes the other principle, and we don't live the fullest life that we could. And so we look for both things. We look for the impulse to evolve, and that is to become better at what we do, to better ourselves, to learn, to grow as individuals, to do our work to clean up the crap that we've been carrying with us for lifetimes, to do our shadow work, all of this individualistic work, so that we can, and the way that we show up as an individual in society really is about the feminine and the masculine playing really well together. On the feminine side, to balance that is, how do we connect? How do we connect? And connect with whom and with what? Well, connect with our family, our children, our parents, our culture. How do we connect with nature? How do we become, human beings tend to think of themselves as separate from nature, but we are not. We're animals, and we live on the earth, and we are vastly affected by things that occur in nature, from pollution to climate change, and everything else. So, these things affect our health, they affect our life. So how do we become more connected? Also, how do we connect with divinity? How do we connect with our divine selves, with our own sense of spirit, with something larger than ourselves? On the masculine divine side, how do we evolve spiritually? I'm not going to talk about things like ascension and enlightenment and things like that, because I think those tend to be traps for most people. Most people are looking at sort of a final goal rather than just enjoying the journey. So to balance these forces within yourself, you really need to have both. And let me explain a couple other ways that this can play out. So if we think of the principle of the masculine as the active principle, and the feminine as the passive principle, we need to balance ourselves physically and mentally and emotionally between activity and rest. And too much activity, too much masculine activity, and our health can start to break down. And the same thing can happen with too much rest. So you need a fine balance between resting and recuperating and activity, right? Both of those things balance out, provide the maximum health. On a physical level, on a biological level, we have the sympathetic nervous system, which is very active, responds to threats, responds to fight, flight, flee, freeze, all of these, but also feed and fornicate. For I won't use a four-letter word for that one, but all of these F words. And then the feminine is the parasympathetic nervous system, or relates to the parasympathetic nervous system, that is responsible for repairing our cells. It's responsible for rest and digestion, and even this process called autophagy, which I'm sorry for using a $3 biology word, but that is the process of cleaning out the old cells that are no longer useful to us. And that's actually an incredibly important process, probably overlooked by most people, but getting rid of old parts of ourselves, recycling the old parts of our biology, is super important to our health. So again, these are ways to physically balance the masculine and the feminine. To mentally, because we live on all of these different planes. We live in the physical plane and the mental and the emotional and the astral and etheric and causal and beyond and beyond. We live on all of these different planes. So how do we balance these energies out? Because, as the Kybalion states, the masculine and feminine principles manifest on all planes. So if you think about mental activity, right, we can balance concentration and thought and really strong mental activity with things like meditation, which is more feminine, more receptive. There are active forms of meditation which are more masculine, but I'm just talking about really like clear mind meditation. So how do we do that on our emotional level, right? Because a lot of people either have very flat emotion, or they have like no emotion, they've repressed their emotions, or they have they're dysregulated and their emotions are all over the place. So it's really important to find a balance. It's important to not repress, but it's important to find a way to balance out and not be lost to your emotions as well. So finding that middle ground where you can feel things but not be overwhelmed by them, and that might be a job for therapy, for example, or it might be helped by meditation or what have you. But that's a way to balance out the masculine and feminine. Really, maximum health, mind, body, and spirit, is about finding this balance, being in balance with nature, being in balance with our bodies, getting enough rest, getting enough activity, eating the right things in balance, learning the right things in balance. What are the right things? Well, I don't know. That's for you to decide, but you can put some thought into it. You can think about it. You can examine what works for you. I'm not dogmatic. I'm not going to prescribe anything for you, but I'm just going to talk about some of these principles. So on a spiritual level, there are active and passive spiritual activities. Meditation can be a passive spiritual activity. There are active spiritual activities such as shamanic journeying, which is the main practice of shamanism, or certain guided meditations, or energy work like Qigong or Tai Chi works the physical body, but also the energy body. And then there are very passive ones. There are very passive forms, and I've already mentioned meditation, but there are some shamanic practices where we have what's called a dismemberment journey, or a journey to spaces that are void of, there is a void space that we will sometimes journey to, which is very resting and healing in that way. So there are activities that we can do that are both masculine and feminine, and help to balance out those sides of ourselves. So we can look at these on all different planes, and you can see very easily how important it is to bring balance for your health, to perform at your best, to have the fullest, most happy, joy-filled life in flow with the universe, right? And this is really what it's all about. This is really what we're achieving, although achieving is a very masculine word, but achieving and attaining, holding on to, realizing, is being in flow with the universe. And that is really what enlightenment and ascension and that sort of thing is about. It's about not having um, aversion or attachment or aversion, right? So attachment is trying to pull things towards you, and aversion is trying to push things away from you. So over attachment is a is too much feminine, right? Being too attached to things, and aversion, pushing everything away, so that it's just you sitting there. That is too much masculine, and when those are out of balance, either one of them, uh, you know, that's not healthy. That's not a healthy situation to be in mentally, physically, or spiritually. Um, so with that, I'm going to wrap up this talk on how to balance your masculine and feminine energies. And know that I've also covered, mind, body, spirit on multiple levels, but more to come, because this concept, this principle of masculine and feminine energy is something that I like to talk about a lot. In my world, in the shamanic world, most practitioners are female, and which is totally fine, and fantastic, actually, because in so many spiritual practices, there's dominance by males. But I do find myself sometimes acting as a balancing force in a circle or in a group setting, to bring some of the masculine energy in. Not patriarchal energy, not the patriarchy. That is an imbalance. That is horrible. And patriarchy, let me tell you something, is bad for everybody. So I'm going to wrap it up. I will talk more on this subject soon. Please give my channel a subscribe if you get a chance. We're just getting off the ground, and lots of good stuff to come.